Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So, who are the best champions to take to rank 4? And obviously we all have our own ideas about the game, entirely based on our preferences and the game modes and all of that stuff. But I do think that objectively there are a handful of champions that effectively are quote-unquote the perfect choice, or a choice that makes more sense than others. And that is not to say you should absolutely rank these champions up first and stuff like that. I love seeing all sort of different rank ups, rank 4 Novas and rank 4 Morbiuses and rank 4 Punisher 2099s and Spirals and so on and so forth. And I think that's perfectly cool. You like the champion, you have the champion, and just go and rank it if you want. At the same time, I am getting a ton of questions. Should I rank for this or that champion? Or which do you think is better or more useful and stuff like that? And overall, over the last couple of days, the amount of questions have increased. Because when we got our first rank 4, it was a class gem. So you kind of had an idea, or maybe you were shifting in between the two champions in a class that, you kind of knew the best. But all of a sudden, when you have to choose from all the champions in the game, it is much harder to do so. And therefore, since many people have gotten their first free reign choice of which champion takes rank 4, I do again think that there are 4 options that stand above others. Every single one of these 4 champions is great offensively and defensively with varied, distribution of their power. Some are slightly better on attack, not as good on defense, but still good. So all of them would be considered a dual threat, dual purpose champions. Every single one of these champions work in just about every game mode. You can bring them in longer form content, you can bring them in shorter form content, you can use them in war, in battlegrounds, in questing, everywhere. So we're going to start with the first and I think kind of the most obvious choice, and it's Deathless Thanos. Now, he's relatively new to the game, but he's, crashing this party hard. The best thing about Deathless Thanos, in my opinion, is the availability. It's not one of those champions that's super rare, exclusive, or hard to get, or has been entirely up to RNG. Yes, of course, there are those people who are missing out on Deathless Thanos, who didn't play the game, but there are a ton of people who do have him and have a way or have had a way to get him guaranteed. So he's, fairly widespread in the game. And he's just crazy good, man. The amount of insane matchups that he takes, and matchups that he shouldn't in theory. If you are using him well enough, he can do Photon decently well. He can take Bullseye decently well by pushing him to level 2. He can deal with dominoes and does Enchantress, which he absolutely should not, and so on and so forth. So he's a crazy good attacker for short and long form content, because, he ramps up fast enough for him to be quick in battlegrounds and Alliance War and the like. And then, he has high enough ceiling that's easy enough to maintain for his damage output to be more than adequate in longer form content as well. So, offensively, I do think, he's an absolute powerhouse. Defensively, I do think he is not the best defender among these. He largely has his, stall going on for him. Because the protections, they do extend the fight. They can completely eat up, a burst of damage as well effectively if you mistime your level 2 or something. So, he can stall quite decently well. You would want somebody that has very specific set of abilities to deal as much damage to him as possible. And combining with his protection stalling out you, 3 times in a fight. With many champions, you can't be super aggressive towards him either. With most champions, you can't be super aggressive because he does have significantly increased combat power rate, so he fills up his special power bars quicker. And on top of all of that, if you get too aggressive, he's going to start going unstoppable. And unless you have counter for that, that's going to be a bad time. But in general, still a very, very solid defender, for sure. So, makes a lot of sense. Not the best prestige champion, but still, I'd say it's, solid enough. Then moving on, and kind of staying in the Cosmic class, it's obviously Serpent. Now, Serpent, for a long time, was looked at as a nightmare defender. And I still stand by every single negative, awful thing I have said about Serpent. I do think the existence of Serpent, the way he is designed as defender, has made the game worse. Kabam's obviously selling 79 counters to Serpent now. It just seems like, every Mystic Champion's selling angle now is like, hey, he can counter Serpent. But still, I as a defender, I think he has taken the game in a worse direction that I do not like. He's one of those champions where, unless you get like a specific design purpose built defender, you're probably just gonna die. He has like 50 million defensive abilities. Obviously, there are counters now, and these counters do take him relatively well. The cool thing about Serpent, though, is even if opponent has like the perfect counters, most of them ain't that fast. And if you drop a Serpent down and, opponent has Chavez, Kushal, Spiral, Shatra, often, if you have reasonably good matchup, you can just outpace your opponents as well. But yes, he's a crazy nasty piece of work on defense. Especially when we get to face him in some nasty Alliance War nodes and stuff like that. So there we go. That alone gives him a ton of value. But then there is the other side of Serpent. And the way I actually look at this is that Kabam was so focused on making him the insane defender, giving him 895 defensive abilities, that maybe, without intention or knowing, made him a very, very good attacking champion too. Because out of those 898 abilities that are crazy on defense, a whole bunch of them help him on offense and give him a ton of utility. Obviously, he has his death immunity. He goes immune to stun effects during opponent's special attacks. He ramps up and eventually starts hitting quite fast. He has power gain, which lets him deal with some matchups he otherwise wouldn't. Immunity to Cold Snap, reduced duration of incoming bleeds by 90%. He's immune to combat power rate. Some power drains and other abilities messing with his power gain. Has access to Fear debuff, stopping opponents unblockable and unstoppable effects. I believe it's unblockable. And removes unblockable. And then he has access to True Focus, so he shuts down Miss and Evade abilities, which has been tremendously useful. He has access to bursts of energy damage. He has access to Pierce, and so on and so forth. It's a ton of stuff that's going on. And he's proven himself to be one of the MVPs for just about all the challenging content offensively. He's great in Necropolis. He was great in Epoch. He was great in Ordeal. He's one of the MVPs for latest piece of story content. It's just crazy, crazy good and very, effective and safe and steady, especially when you do not do super short form content. And as it turns out, offensively in Battlegrounds, he's kind of solid too. He's not going to be the fastest one. He's going to have his fights last typically 60 seconds and longer, or like 50 seconds and longer, pending your matchups on equal ranks. But you can draft him as a defender and use him as an attacker even in Battlegrounds. And then in Alliance Wars, obviously, he's, again, crazy, crazy useful. So there you go. Serpent is ultimately one of the more useful and significant champions in the game right now. And there's just no escaping it. He is one of the best rank-up options because he is everywhere. And he's, a front runner in most pieces of content recently as well. So a very, very good pick for rank 4 in my opinion. And the added benefit of having rank 4 Serpent is that your opponents will often ban yours, so you don't have to fight Serpent, and who doesn't like that? And spot number 3, I'm going to give it to Onslaught. Onslaught's also definitely one of the top 4 champions in the game. There's just no other way to spin it. Again, he's dual purpose champion. He's one of the highest prestige champions in the game. which is enticing in itself for a bunch of people. And he's, again, one of those champions that just has like a million abilities that always seem to somehow work. And the best proof of Onslaught being one of the MVPs is I do not remember a season where I didn't use Onslaught. That makes sense. We had Power Shield metas, Onslaught's great at that. We have Unstoppables, he still works perfectly fine and is, solid defender, decent attacker, just because he absolutely annihilates all the skill class and has a ton of decently good matchups outside. He's also one of those champions that often will not be the best option for something, but will just seem to work in one way or another. And in between his immunities, his first light medium attacks not making contact, in between his debuffs and shutting down opponents' regeneration, in between him blocking unblockable attacks from skill champions, that's, not as useful. But what is cool is that he can stun debuff immune champions, for instance, which was super useful in the Ordeal as well. You can't stun immune champions, but he can stun debuff immune champions. And yeah, again, I do not remember a time when Onslaught was sitting out from a deck or a meta or something like that. That speaks volumes. It's also one of those champions that just completely alters, what you can and can't do and how well you can do certain matchups. Then obviously his defensive prowess has dropped significantly since his release. Initially, he was a nightmare of a champion, but then, we had to face him on one of the pain fights, and then we learned how to dex his level 1, and then players get better at dexing his level 2, and then we learned how to punish it, and still, he can be a good defender. He's one of those champions that can't just easily be taken with anyone. You can be taking your Neuroshock damage, which will be enough for people to win their matches purely because you have lost some health. Then his special attacks last forever, so he can stall you a bit. And then on top of it all, there are a ton of champions which you cannot use against him, because if you use any energy dot, you're going to be getting a ton of Neuroshocks. And the worst thing that Onslaught has in his kit by far is the AI. It's just nasty piece of work. And mistakes are not uncommon against Onslaught at all. And again, he's one of those champions you can safely draft, knowing that he's tremendously versatile attacker that, likely will have a use. And then he's also more than capable defender with high prestige that works, again, in every type of piece of content. He was one of the Necropolis mutant run MVPs, because he can do massive health pools very well with, getting his 20 degens and maintaining them and then spamming level 3s. And yeah, there's just not much to add. He's very powerful champion in the game right now, and it makes all the sense in the world to take him to rank 4. And then the last one joining them, in my opinion, is also Photon. Photon is criminally underrated as an attacker, even though more and more recently, I think people kind of realize how good she is offensively, because she, again, can take care of most of the Mystic matchups and then expand herself out to a ton of different fights. One of the coolest abilities that people do not appreciate of Photon enough is that when you do get parried, and with the new AI that happens a lot, you do have your safety net, and then obviously shut down opponents. Willpower as a defender, which, well, needless to speak of Photon as defender to begin with at this point in the game, in my opinion. She's one of those champions that can be taken down with a plethora of different attackers, but she is very good at slowing people down because of all the debuffs and inequity and so on and so forth, and then being forced to wait out the charges. Then she's, again, very good at dealing chip damage to players, and ultimately also just destroying them via unblockable special attacks if you ever make some mistake to push her to level 2 whilst she's in her hard light form, or just not on point with your parries or get caught on her level 1. She has counters. She now can get nuked as well, but she's, again, more than significant force on defense. She's one of those champions, again, that absolutely force you to be aware when she's anywhere in the quest, on defense, in your opponent battlegrounds, drafts, and so forth. And offensively, again, she's actually very, very powerful, because it does take her a little while to get going, But she does have access to taunt. She does have access to a ton of debuffs, a passive petrify whenever you apply your debuffs. You do have access to the energy damage, again, massive energy resistance, and immunities to bleed and power steal effects. Very high energy. You can parry non-contact attacks, which is again becoming more and more significant in my opinion. And yeah, you do have the safety net of when you get parried. She bypasses miss from the beginning of the fight on her mediums, which again is quite huge and significant, especially against somebody like Enchantress. And then when you enter your hard light form, you just flat out ignore miss. You can be more aggressive with her than most champions because your suppression debuffs on your mediums, and she can eliminate opponents' crit resistances with her heavy attack. She is, again, one of those champions that is in the game and will stay in the game because she's just made better than most. So I'm not going to argue about the exact sequence of which one of these champions is, top 1 and which one of them is top 3 and so forth, but I do think that these 4 champions, Deathless Thanos, Serpent, Onslaught, and Photon, are by far and away the objectively best choices for your initial rank force. That said, this is a game, and if you love the champions, whichever you do love, you should go ahead and rank them. If you are decided on what you want, this video is not necessarily for you. At the very least, not in a form of an advice. But there are a lot of people who are asking a piece of advice from me. And, well, this is the best I have. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you soon. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So